Live everywhere.
Daily Co's Radio on netrootsradio.com presents
David Waldman. Kagro in the morning show. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? It's Monday, July 10th, 2017. Oh, I forgot to put up our counter. We must be on week 25 or so of The Presidential Apprentice. I've lost track of that. I was keeping it somewhere, and I think it's about 25. Does it make a difference? I don't know. We're surviving, or at least made it through the weekend. The president, of course, away for the last half of the week at the G20 meeting, which turned out to be an international disaster again, as usual. Plenty to wrap up from that debacle, both substantive and stylistic, although there's not much to add on the substantive front except to say that it is the conclusion of much of the rest of the world that the United States has ceded its leadership position as the leader of the free world, but that's actually kind of old news. It just sort of cemented that sentiment, if you will. The only real new news here is all the stylistic flubs that came along the way, including, seating Ivanka in his place when he got up to leave the meeting. And why did he get up to leave that meeting, by the way? Did we ever find that out, or was that just too disgusting to talk about? Maybe it was something like that. I don't know. I was under the impression that Trump didn't do that sort of thing away from home, but you never know. I guess at some point you have to give up and go. Other stylistic flubs would include, there was the White House press release, as I recall, that touted his meeting with President Jinping of China. And I think actually Donald Trump himself understands that protocol well enough. And when he tweets, he says President Xi, but I guess that could also just be a Twitter thing. I can fit Xi, and I'm not sure how to spell Jinping anyway. So, and it's much longer. And I don't have as many characters to deal with on that one. Let's see. Other news out of the European jaunt, not much. We covered a little bit of the stop in Poland before the week came to a conclusion. And then that was it. He was wandering around like a lost child. No one would talk to him. Plenty of footage and photos. They really tell the story of the G20. Someone was comparing previous group photos of the leaders of the G20, which almost always feature the President of the United States at the center of the lineup because he's at the center of the action when the G20 are meeting. But in this case, he's off on the periphery, well off to the side, Angela Merkel pretty much taking his spot. You may have heard the news segment, which since went viral, filed by one of the Australian news channels, summing things up rather harshly, but I think pretty close to the mark, if not entirely fair. It's certainly, it's an interesting thing that American news networks, you're reminded when you see things like that how careful American news networks are not to step on the president's toes, even when he's doing a terrible job and everyone can see it. Anyway, Trump's back. He flew back in time to make it to his golf course for the 37th time yesterday. I don't know whether they ever acknowledged that he was playing golf or not, but that's usually their habit, to pretend he's there for some meetings. And he is up rage tweeting this morning, angry about people being upset about Ivanka taking his place at the table, accusing James Comey of illegally leaking classified information, as if he cared about that. Let's see, he's not yet addressed the probably the biggest development in the Trump-Russia front from the weekend. The fact that Donald Trump Jr., for whatever reason, is now admitting to everybody that he met with a Russian operative in the early stages of the general election campaign, or even prior, actually, to, I think, to the nomination, in official nomination at the convention, that he sat down. We'll get the background with it, but the basics of it, I think you all know. Sat down with a Russian lawyer with Kremlin ties, but everybody's got Kremlin ties, I guess, if you rise to the level, a certain level in Russia. And, but a bit of a, let's say, checkered record for this lawyer, and, I guess primarily known for lobbying in the United States and working internationally to, rid Russia of the scourge of American laws that allow the American administration to blacklist people implicated in human rights violations. What a terrible thing to do. And I don't know exactly. Well, we'll go over the stories and we'll round up the rest of the headlines, of course. But parsing into this thing, I guess the most ridiculous thing so far from Donald Trump Jr.'s stories is the idea that people said, apparently, well, this Russian lawyer, very well known for her activity on this front, and a simple Google would have told you that, but he's got a ready answer for that one because he's extremely smart. He cuts you off at the pass, Donald Trump Jr. does. I didn't Google her name because I didn't know her name. Nobody told me what her name was or why she wanted to meet with us. And then, of course, that story changed later. It became, I heard from a friend, and that story became worse too, that she wanted to give us information, damaging information about Hillary Clinton, which pretty much gives away the collusion case. But never mind that. I was actually fascinated by the idea that Donald Trump Jr. thought we would all buy the story that he would take a meeting at the peak of the campaign activity and bring in big players in the campaign, Kushner and Manafort, and waste their time calling them into a meeting. I don't know who's coming. I don't know who it is. I don't know what it's about. It's supposed to be something nasty about Clinton. That could certainly pique his interest, but I'm just baffled by the part of the story where somebody who's unknown to him and whose name he doesn't know makes it through Trump Tower security. And by the way, the Secret Service by that point was already 6 months or so into their mission guarding Trump himself. So the meeting's in Trump Tower. Trump's there. Donald Trump Jr. says Trump Sr. didn't attend the meeting. Nobody really knows necessarily about that. But the question of unknown Russian, don't even know her name, but she's actually notorious to everybody who does know her name, should be allowed in to meet with me, the campaign manager, the son-in-law Kushner, all on the say-so of a dude he met once at the Miss Universe concert. Okay, well, all right. As it turns out, his dad is a Russian oligarch and has $1 bazillion. Those are the kinds of people that the Trumps kind of automatically listen to and would grant an audience to. But I don't know. I can't spend too much longer on this because the fact of the matter is he knew exactly who it was who was coming. He knew the name. He might even have known what she was about. Probably not. He had the name and he was incurious. A friend with money who's Russian, said we have nasty crap on Clinton. That was enough for him. And that's actually a less incriminating story than the one he told, which is the most amazing thing about this particular chapter in the Trump-Russia story. Donald Trump Jr. is just terrible. I guess maybe it comes from being brought up by a narcissist and in an atmosphere in which there's just nobody there to tell them no about anything, except I guess his dad is actually quite abusive to him. So anyway, he probably thought he was doing a good thing in his simplistic way. And he probably thought he was telling a good cover story in his simplistic way. It's just that he punched it full of holes all by himself, trying to avoid a really small problem like, why didn't you Google this woman and figure out who she was? The right answer is, I didn't care. She had damaging information on Hillary Clinton, and I wanted to hear it because I hate Hillary Clinton. That was at least the honest answer. Probably causes less problems long term, just in terms of if he ever has to answer questions about this thing, embarrassing himself by looking like he's making things up on the spot. And it does look like he's making it up on the spot because I guess when reporters asked what sort of damaging information was it that she claimed to have on Hillary Clinton, he hadn't gotten any, I guess, or else maybe it was worse and he didn't use it and he's hiding it, or else I guess the third possibility we ought to entertain is that it was something that is directly connectable to a very specific attack that the Trump campaign may have made against Hillary during the campaign, and if he admits that, then the collusion case is sealed even tighter. But I'm a little bit suspicious of the idea that when he's put on the spot and asked what sort of information did she have, he says, it wasn't usable, it was nothing. What was it about? It was that Hillary Clinton was, essentially, his story is that Hillary Clinton was colluding with the Russians, the DNC, and Hillary's campaign were colluding with Russians. Exactly, well, kind of, sort of like exactly the thing that you're accusing me of, except we switched my father's name for her name, and that's exactly what happened, because he's extraordinarily creative, and that's what he comes up with on the fly. So that's my current pet theory. We should keep an eye on this thing. I don't know whether investigators will ever get a chance to sit down with Donald Trump Jr. and interview him, and whether he'll just try to lie his way through it or what. But there's plenty more happening besides that. They're trying to take your health care away. How about that? The Congress returns to Washington, D.C. this week, and we'll get some indication at some point, probably Tuesday, Wednesday of this week, just what the hell they think they're going to try to do and how hard they're going to hit you over the head and with what blunt instrument. So with that in mind, let's bring Greg in and catch up on the weekend news and headlines. Good morning, Greg.
Hey, good morning. So basically, there's really two stories. There's the Trump, Russia, Donald Jr. Fredo story.
Yes.
With the family throwing him under the bus. And then there's the healthcare story. I hope I get the healthcare. If not, I'll do it Wednesday. But I'll do my best. So what I'll do is I'll talk fast, talk over you, and pretend I'm from New York.
All righty.
Oh, I am from New York. I always talk over you. So maybe that'll work.
It's working now.
You never know.
Okay.
Let me start with a timeline, because timelines are really helpful. I learned this from Marcy Wheeler.
Okay.
If you get the timeline straight, it helps to point out certain things. So this is from First Read, NBC News. June 7th, because June and July are the important time frames for all of this.
Okay. Last year?
Yeah.
All right.
June 7, 2016 primary season essentially concludes. Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton as the presumptive party nominees.
Right.
But also Trump sees a hard slog of delegates ahead. In other words, he's going to have to consolidate the non-Trumpers and make sure that everybody's on the same page. And he sees that he's going to run against Hillary Clinton and figures he'll lose.
As many people did.
On June 7th, that's the way it looked.
Yes.
June 9th, Donald Trump Jr., along with Jared Kushner and former campaign chair Paul Manafort, meet with Kremlin-connected lawyer Natalia Veselnitskaya.
Yes.
Now, did she or anybody else close to them happen to also live in Trump Tower? Could have.
Yes.
You know, there's lots of people there, so maybe that's how they get through.
Lots of Russians there.
Anyway, June 9th is when this meeting takes place, and that's what the whole story is about, what's going on in the New York Times reporting it, and Trump Jr. hasn't denied it. More on that later. On June 9th, the same day that they're meeting, and remember, this is a micromanaged Trump empire where Trump knows everything about what's going on with his kids and directs them.
True.
On June 9th, Trump tweets about Clinton's missing for 33,000 emails.
June 9th.
Same day as the meeting.
Yeah,
Same day as the meeting that they went to see if they could find out more dirt about Clinton.
Right.
Coincidence? I think not.
Oh, I think not. Right. I meant not.
Yeah. Anyway, July 18th, a couple of weeks later, Washington Post reports on the first day of the GOP convention that the Trump campaign changed the Republican platform to ensure it didn't call for giving weapons to Ukraine to fight Russian rebel forces.
Good reminder.
July 21st, GOP convention concludes with Trump giving a speech accepting. And on July 22nd, the day after, WikiLeaks releases stolen emails from the Democratic National Committee. Then a few days later, Democratic convention begins. So this meeting that Donald Trump had to look for dirt on Hillary happened before simultaneously with Trump asking for Clinton's missing 33,000 emails, which I'll remind people really had nothing to do with anything and were personal, and she was allowed to get rid of them. GOP convention concludes with Trump giving a speech, and then WikiLeaks releases the emails. Then the Democratic convention begins, and then on July 27, in final news conference of his 2016 campaign, Trump asked Russia, if you're listening, I hope you're able to find the 30,000 emails that are missing.
Right.
In August, Obama's CIA director, Brennan, confronts his Russian counterpart about Russia interference. October 4th, WikiLeaks' Julian Assange says his organization will publish emails related to the 2016 campaign. October 7th, Department of Homeland Security and Director of National Intelligence release a statement directly saying Russia's interfering, and WikiLeaks begins releasing Clinton campaign Podesta's emails. Remember, that's a different hack than the DNC. October 31st, this WikiLeaks is like a treasure trove, Trump says. November 4th, boy, I love reading WikiLeaks, Trump says from Ohio. And the bottom line is the timeline of what now is circumstantial evidence itself of some kind of relationship that the Trump campaign had with Russian sources, said this story. The question is, what else is there? And is this just the tip of the iceberg? Plus, the sourcing for the New York Times story came from, quote, 3 advisors to the White House.
Why do they tell them?
Sourcing was 3 advisors to the White House, and Jonathan Swan from Axios tweeted last night, sources close to the Trump campaign are trying to figure out which advisors to the White House
Yes, of course.
had it in for Fredo.
Anybody?
Could have been.
Yeah, although it does raise eyebrows, and I don't understand. There's such mixed messages about people who will do anything, throw anybody under the bus, lie for Trump, and then others who why would anybody tell this story?
Because, note, the same day
Yes.
that he's meeting with these people, Donald Trump, who is now the president, is tweeting about Clinton's emails.
Yeah.
So the working theory is Trump Jr. gets thrown under the bus because they have to protect Trump Sr., who's more involved in this than you know.
Oh. I see. So we're supposed to run around chasing circumstantial evidence about Trump Jr.'s meeting while Trump Sr. skates?
Yep, something like that. So here's Josh Marshall taking stock of the Times blockbuster.
Okay.
Okay, first, what I suspect is the most important detail in the story is the sources. The Times reports they got the information from 3 advisors to the White House, briefed on the meeting, and 2 others with knowledge of it. They apparently talked after the release of the first story, which was there was a meeting, but it didn't talk about the contents.
Yeah.
And that also allowed, by the way, Don Jr. to first say it didn't happen. Then when it did happen, it was about adoption.
Yes, that's what.
And then when the second story came out, well, it wasn't about adoption. It was really about trying to chase Clinton's emails, but I didn't get anything, so therefore it's okay.
Yes. And by the way, when they say it was about adoption, what they mean is I was being lobbied about dropping sanctions against human rights abusers. And then if we did that,
exactly
then they'd have an
it's
adoption
dropping
discussion.
sanctions against the Russians, and that's where all this leads.
Yeah.
That's
Well,
exactly.
and that helps kind of understand it, and it fits better into the timeline too.
It does. Now, the 3 advisors thing. They apparently talked after the release of the first story, before the second story, because they were the source of the second story. This is highly, highly significant, says Josh Marshall. Needless to say, advisors to the White House are not in the business of taking highly damaging stories and volunteering new information, which makes them catastrophically damaging.
No, not ordinarily.
The only reason a president's allies ever do something like that is either they get ahead of something much more damaging or get first crack at shaping public understanding of something much more damaging. There's really no other explanation. We don't know yet what drove them to volunteer. 5 of them did it. It wasn't a matter of one person going rogue. So keep that in mind. Number 2, the Times story doesn't say whether any damaging information was provided. It'll be interesting to find out whether Veselnitskaya did share any such information.
Right.
Number 3,
Well,
and there aren't that many of them.
Okay.
I'll stop interrupting you so you can actually talk in your own show.
No. Go on.
No.
Oh, well, I was going to say that, finish him up here. Let me open up
Okay.
the thing and follow along too.
Right, this is the Josh Marshall one. Do you have that?
Got it.
Okay. It's always revealing if somebody's explanation of damaging information is both damning in and of itself and absurd on its face. And then they go over the statement that Trump Jr. released to multiple news organizations in response to the latest story.
Horrible.
Okay. While Trump Jr. does not say that he met with Veselnitskaya to get damaging information about Clinton, he confirms he was there for information that would help the campaign. Once it didn't pan out, he concluded the meeting was a bust. The Russian lawyers claim that Russia was funding the Clinton campaign seems preposterous. That's what Trump says in the statement. Trump himself says as much, but I'm not saying it's a preposterous accusation. It's preposterous as part of Trump's story. It's true that the first WikiLeaks email release came roughly 6 weeks after this meeting, which occurred on June 9th, as we went over in the timeline. Mm-hmm. The first report that Russian government operatives had hacked into the DNC servers came out a week later on June 14th.
Yeah.
But Trump's disturbingly close ties to Russia and affinity for Putin was already a topic of active discussion, and Putin was known to be particularly hostile to Hillary Clinton, so the whole story doesn't add up. Again, yesterday Trump Jr. said he met with the lawyer to discuss the Magnitsky Act and Russian adoptions. Today, he says he was lured into the meeting on the pretext of getting campaign info, only later had that discussion. So his story changed completely after one day.
Yes.
Number 4, Trump Jr. says in a statement his father knew nothing about this. You know it's bad, and they want to insulate the president.
Yeah.
Number 5, May, June, and July, and this is the last one, are critical months in the Russia story. A huge amount of stuff of consequence happened just in July, and there's already suggestions that, as yet unproven, that a top Trump associate was offered caches of email in the months or weeks just prior to the first WikiLeaks release on July 22nd. This story sounds quite similar, at least the opening gambit, to such an offer. So we have a growing number of stories like these, each seemingly damning, but which we are told are mere coincidences and misunderstandings with no connection to any of the other stories, and that's simply not credible.
Yeah. Well, no part of this is credible. What I didn't hear, although maybe I missed it in the timeline, was there some inclusion of this? I saw, and I haven't seen any confirmation of it elsewhere or any link, but there was someone was tweeting here that Trump announced an upcoming presser in which he was going to have some damaging information about Clinton on June 9th from Trump Tower. Was that in the timeline?
No, just the tweet about 30,000 emails or 33,000 emails.
So maybe
Same
that
day.
was
that was the reference.
The tweet was that, and that's not quite an announcement of an upcoming press conference. Frank Mankiewicz was that. What was the source of that one? And I don't know where he got that from, and there's no.
Well, could be, but
link is offered. But that
I
would be.
I don't know if anything came out of that.
I would make that a larger entry on the timeline if I could confirm that, and so maybe not.
Right. Anyway, put that aside because it might be.
All right.
We'll use the Trump tweet about the 33,000 emails as a marker to hold that spot.
Okay.
All right. Now here's Ben Wittes talking about his lawyerly view of what happened. And he says, since people seem to appreciate my annotation of yesterday's collusion story, here's some thoughts on today's.
Don't encourage him. Just kidding.
President Trump's eldest son, Donald Trump Jr.,
yes,
was promised damaging information about Hillary Clinton before agreeing to meet with a Kremlin-connected Russian lawyer during the 2016 campaign. According to 3 advisors to the White House briefed on the meeting and 2 others with knowledge of it. That's where the 5 came from. That's directly from the Times story.
Okay.
And what he says, first, note the sourcing. This is clearly not an investigative leak. This is a set of White House admissions in response to the story. Okay?
All right.
And then it says, in subsequent interviews, the advisors and others revealed the motivation behind it. So, which is important because we're about to hear a lot about fake news. It's the principal speaking. This isn't fake news, therefore.
Okay.
Can't call it fake news because this comes from the White House.
All right.
Okay. The meeting at Trump Tower on June 9, 2016, 2 weeks after Donald Trump clinched the Republican nomination, points to the central question whether the Trump campaign colluded with the Russians. The accounts of the meeting represent the first public indication that at least some of the campaign were willing to accept Russian help. And what he says, the date of the meeting may actually be exculpatory to Trump in one way because it predates the disclosures of the Russian hacking by about a week. I added by about a week, but that's what we got for our timeline. Someone should check me on that point, working from memory, but they may have had a case that any Russian email releases came later So it's unclear what that means.
Yeah, I don't know how that's exculpatory. That sounds like...
Sounds like they asked for it, they didn't have it, and then it came later, as opposed to going to thank them. So I don't know what that means.
Or I have damaging information, and the way we've got it is emails, and in about a week we're going to arrange for a fingerprint-less release of all those emails.
But then he goes on to say, but the people interviewed by the Times about the meeting said the expectation was she would do so. That's what the Times report says.
There you go.
And so this graph is devastating because it shows that Trump folks were willing to cooperate with Kremlin in exchange for dirt.
Yes, and here's where his story, his weird Don Trump Jr.'s weird spin comes into it. Is it's I think they probably thought about testing out the story of, well, I mean, there's one thing to take a meeting with some random lawyer versus I didn't meet with the Kremlin. Putin didn't come and tell me he was interested in helping. They wouldn't have considered this likely collusion with the Russian government at that point because they had probably no serious idea about how the Russian government worked, period. They just dealt with business people and oligarchs, and they knew they were connected and protected.
Right, but they didn't know enough to, not go to a meeting themselves.
Right, so instead they say, well, I didn't, and everybody says, well, everybody knows that she's connected. Well, I didn't know who she was. Aha, so how could I know that she was connected if I didn't know who she was? Which is where the story begins to make no sense.
It makes no sense at all. So then Wittes goes on to say, and the next graph's also devastating. Trump Jr. admits his only interest in the meeting was the dirt the Russians might provide on Clinton. In other words, when the sanctions came up, he was no longer interested, he claims. But that also suggests that what the Russians were interested in were sanctions relief.
Yes.
So how that helps him, that's
right.
Why everybody calls him Fredo.
Yeah.
Okay. This is a very interesting graph, he then says. The lawyers and spokesman for Mr. Kushner, Mr. Manafort, did not immediately respond. In his statement, Trump Jr. said he asked Mr. Manafort and Mr. Kushner to attend, but did not tell them what the meeting was about. This is a very interesting graph. POTUS denies knowledge, and Trump Jr.'s statement clears Manafort and Kushner of knowing. In other words, Jr. takes the fall.
Sure. That too, nonsense. Campaign manager, probably a little busy at that time. In order to make this work, you have to imagine these dialogues taking place in which somebody is telling the busiest, most involved people in a campaign for president, come to a meeting. Who's going to be there? I don't know. What's it about? Not sure. All right.
But it's important to drop what you're doing because, you don't have anything else to do.
And the only way that becomes believable, of course, is if it's important. Well, how do you know it's important? It's Russian leaks of opposition research on Clinton. Okay, that I can do. Right. Then I can be there. And one more reminder, I think it helps make a lot more sense of the story if we do, like you did there, refer to this as it's obvious that the meeting is about sanctions relief. The adoption thing is kind of a red herring. Remember, of course, the adoption only comes into it. That was the reaction of the Russian government to the sanctions. We're going to make it hard or impossible for American families to adopt Russian children because we're being sanctioned for human rights violations. And every time adoption is used as the shorthand for what that meeting was about or ended up being about, that's supposed to be exculpatory. But the reality is adoption only enters into the picture because it's a reaction to human rights violation sanctions. And everybody remembers throughout the whole campaign and immediate post-campaign, everybody knows that the Russians were after a promise from Trump that there would be sanctions relief if he became president, and then the decision to make him president. Oh, we could actually get this sanctions relief. Excellent.
So what he concludes by saying, by the way, the Russian lawyer denies this and denies that she had anything to do with the Russian government, and the Kremlin denies it, which of course makes it probable. But the point is that in the story himself, Trump Jr. Contradicts all of that and says, no, that's exactly what it was about.
Good. All right. I'm not sure why.
Jr., right? Yeah. So Liam Donovan, conservative writer for NRO, writes, we're focusing on Don Jr. because it's his statement and it's fun to beat up on the eponymous prince, but it seems like Jared is more exposed here and just makes the point that Jared is actually the government official. Jared is the one that forgot to put the meeting down on his disclosure list. Again. So there's at least 3 meetings that Jared forgot to list.
He forgets
And
all
so
the meetings.
Jared really is more exposed, even though Don is the idiot.
Yes. That's true. He is more exposed, and I guess that's funny. I mean, the information lies in the hands of somebody with a big mouth, an ego to protect, but no government position to worry about. That's a terrible combination. No wonder
It is. So, people on Twitter are going, okay, fine. So Ivanka and Jared are having a talk, and Jared said, it's me or your brother. And Ivanka says, that's not a choice. Don goes under the bus.
Excellent. Okay, I'll take it.
Meanwhile, while this is happening, Trump's cyber tweets caused dismay and confusion because 12 hours apart, 2 tweets about Russia get everybody talking. It's the whole thing about the meeting at the G20 and Trump agreeing to allow the Fox to have a supervisor role with the hen house.
Yes.
And then 12 hours later says, of course, nothing like that's going to happen. And just like with the professionals in the State Department, the professionals in cybersecurity have no clue what Trump is talking about. And everybody realizes, as I pointed out on Sunday, the Captain Obvious statement that Trump should not be president. And there's something definitely wrong with the Republicans for accepting this.
Yes.
Sure, they make lots of noises this morning, over the weekend, about how this is all unacceptable. Lindsey Graham, John McCain, the usual players. The question is, what are they going to do about it? Even Marco Rubio was making fun of Trump about this. What is he going to do about it?
Yeah. Well, yeah, nothing, as usual.
Nothing.
By the
right.
way.
It's erosion of Trump's position. And now I guess Trump is really trying to make sure that he runs his own candidates against Heller and Flake for primaries. So thank you very much for helping out in the 2018 election.
Excellent. I'll take it.
But, whatever.
Yeah. A good observation along the way here about Trump's tweets about the cybersecurity idea. The tweet, I think, that got everybody totally confused was that second one, where he says, the fact that President Putin and I discussed a cybersecurity unit doesn't mean I think it can happen. It can't,
Yes.
but a ceasefire can and did. Jameson Fosser had, I think, a good observation, underappreciated observation. Maybe right, maybe wrong, but this helps clarify things in a certain way. He said, the more I think about it, the more I think Trump intended it in that sentence, that it can't happen, that he meant it was election hacking, not this joint task force. So if you read it that way, it is interesting. The fact that President Putin and I discussed the cybersecurity unit doesn't mean I think election hacking could have really been true. It couldn't be. But, whatever else, then onto the ceasefire follow-up is more ambiguous in that sense. But, I guess that makes, in the long run, I guess it's as sensible as him saying within 12-hour period, we're going to have an international super crime busting cyber unit. And then I'm just kidding. No, I'm not. That doesn't make any more sense than anything else. But it is interesting to think that could be what Trump meant. It's not that I'm having a joint cyber security force because I think this hacking story was true. I'm having it for, so that it doesn't happen in the future, which is possible.
So, again, to sum up, step back and look at the big picture. Trump campaign admits Trump campaign met with the Russians trying to get dirt on Hillary.
All right.
Right? And then more will come out. And the question on the table is, so much of this is so weird. What are they trying to hide?
Everything.
Everything.
Sure.
But what does it mean and how does that lead to the president? Because eventually it will. To me, it's still about protecting their, maybe they did collude. I thought maybe it's all about just the money and they're just trying to get Russian money into their, real estate empire.
That too.
But on the other hand, maybe they did collude as well.
Oh, I would think that it all.
Because maybe the Russians said, I get that you want the money. We want sanctions.
Yeah.
Relief. And maybe the Trump campaign said, you want sanctions relief? Give us something so we could win.
Yeah.
Maybe it went like that. Maybe it's that simple.
I think so. I think that's the simplest explanation of everything. It starts off simply, no one thinks I can win. Even the Russians don't really think I can win. I don't think I can win. But the Russians say, well, you know what? We could make trouble for Hillary Clinton Would
and
you be a
besides, win or
willing
lose,
conduit?
right now, I'm just the nominee. I'm not
Yeah.
the president. I need the money now. Let's talk about Russian money.
Yeah.
Let's have this meeting to talk
even
about
if it
that.
wasn't,
Well, okay, fine, but we want to talk about sanctions.
Yes. And even if he wasn't seeking money at that point,
Jared is always seeking money.
well, yeah, I mean, they're always seeking money, but I wonder, well, it's funny.
Jared
sometimes
had a 666 Park Avenue.
That's true. Although I think he thought he had that solved with the Chinese at the time. But still, whenever Russia is mentioned, those guys in particular sniff out money. They know that Russians make everything happen with cash, and I need that.
And why did he meet with this particular lawyer? You know, and the answer is pretty simple too. Those are the only Russians they know. They don't know any diplomats.
Oh, that's true. Right. Well, not at that point. They don't.
The only people they know are oligarchs and people who have contacts with oligarchs, because they do.
Right. The story, I knew this would be the case when he first said, oh, well, who set up the meeting? Oh, an acquaintance. All right. Well, that's a dirty acquaintance. Who's the acquaintance? Oh, somebody
in the Washington Post, that was a separate story.
Yeah, somebody I met at the Miss Universe pageant. Then the adoption.
Which is great. Which, by the way, okay, let's, for Bobby Three Sticks there. Yeah. Why don't we open up the Miss Universe books and see who's paying for Miss Universe?
Yes. Well, they did.
Let's see if there's Russian money there, too.
There was. Of course.
Well, he's got a whole division that's looking at that.
Yeah, and there's plenty of reporting on it.
I mean, why should Trump fear him?
I don't know. I can't think of any reason. Nobody else cares. The whole thing was pretty wild, and it devolved pretty quickly, and it's amazing how quickly things unravel.
Yeah, the fact of the matter is that when you step back and look at that picture, you have to assume that Trump knew. You have to, because, he's a micromanager. Yeah. Oh, I didn't pay attention to this one thing.
Even if...
nah, it doesn't work that way.
Yeah, that's probably not the case. And while I could possibly...
And by the way, while I didn't pay attention to this one thing, I'm going to be talking about it on the same day.
Oh, yeah. Never heard of it, but let me have a major speech on it. A major address. Donald Trump Jr., everything I've read about him suggests to me that if he thought there was something good that could have come out of the meeting, certainly if something had come out of the meeting, he would have run to his dad immediately. Guess what I found out? This is value the work that I do, Dad. Check this out.
Pat me on the head. Stop paying attention.
So almost certainly he had gone and said, I'm having this meeting. But although that would have been embarrassing, you would think that maybe experience would have taught him, wait until I have something good and then go say it. But he probably couldn't hold his tongue.
Yeah. How can you start all these golf courses in the middle of a recession? Don't worry about it. We have Russian money.
Right. So,
you
having
said that in the press?
Fredo? Before you were running, though. Donald Trump Jr.'s statement about the amount of Russian money they had comes years before, and at that real estate conference in Eastern Europe. And it was Eric Trump.
Why would you ever say that
spilled it later? Because they don't know. He didn't teach them anything about how to talk about money. They brag about money. All the other families they teach them don't talk about money.
Right.
So they do the opposite because they're disruptors. I don't know.
Anyway, so that's it for Russia for me. We'll see what happens. I'm sure there's more. Let's talk about healthcare. So a couple of stories here, a bunch of stories. Axios, rural GOP senators abandon health bill. And they mentioned Chuck Grassley, and they mentioned John Boozman of Arkansas, Bob Corker, Tennessee, John Hoeven of North Dakota. I mean, these are not the usual suspects. And Politico, time away from Washington deepens GOP misgivings about health plan.
What?
Rallying 50 votes looks even more daunting.
No way.
And the good one was, and I don't have this on the list, but I saw last night that Shelley Moore Capito from West Virginia said, if I have to be the one to block this healthcare bill, I will.
Oh, you said they wouldn't do that.
Who said?
You.
Me?
Yeah, you said there wouldn't be one person who would be willing to be the one to kill it.
Yeah, because she knows saying that knowing she's not going to be the one.
Okay.
She knows if Hoeven and Boozman and Grassley are having issues that she's not going to have to do. That's what makes it look strong without having to put her head on the chopping block. It's
but
perfect.
Yeah, right. So she gets to tell. That's a town meeting thing to say.
Yeah. Exactly.
Okay, gotcha. So, I would do it. Except
it's not going to be one vote. It's going to be a lot of votes. They're way, way, way short. Next one here, Republicans voice growing doubts on U.S. healthcare bill's fate. This is from Reuters. And then there's Republicans increasingly uncertain of a legislative victory of any kind before August. And that's the Washington Post. And so the point I'm trying to make here is that I get that we're always in the moderates will fold kind of mindset.
Yes.
And I get that nobody wants to call the bill dead until the final vote is cast, or that they can't get enough votes to do the pre-vote
motion to proceed.
Motion to proceed. Thank you. And yet, if you objectively step back and look at the situation, it's in worse shape this week than it was last week when I was talking to you, and I just don't see how this thing passes.
Well, I hope not. And that would be a great payoff. I'm happy for the headline as a good place to start. That was the plan all along. I say all along, but for several weeks, lots of questions in the background about what can we do to delay things and push this past the July 4th recess.
Because everybody was quoting Mitch McConnell as correctly saying, we do it this week or it's going to be really tough. They couldn't get it done that week.
Right.
Now it's really tough. Andy Slavitt has an opinion column in the USA Today. Republicans' best play amid healthcare chaos is failure, and that's because the bill is so bad that if it passes, they're screwed.
Yeah.
That's why Shelley Moore Capito doesn't want it to pass.
Well, nobody should. So I'll take it.
Right? So we have that. I have a lot in the pundit roundup. We probably don't have time today to talk about differences between public option versus single payer. And why single payer is so difficult, and in fact, why that's not even the right choice.
Oh?
The right choice is universal coverage. Single payer is just a vehicle to get us there, and it doesn't have to be single payer. A lot of other countries have universal coverage without having single payer. They have government plans, but they also have private plans. There's a mix. And let me, just quickly point the difference. For example, Medicare, which is national, and Medicaid, which is state, have government single payer, but they use private insurance to manage the plans, and they have private doctors and hospitals who administer the health care. As contrasted, let's say, with the VA, where with the Veterans Administration, they have their own hospitals and they have their own doctors.
Yes.
So those are different systems. So my point is, what do you mean when you say single payer? What are you referring to? Are you referring to the Medicare style? Are you referring to the Medicaid style? And as a matter of fact, one of the things that people have to remember, and this is a great chart from John Graves from Vanderbilt that I have at the very, very top of the pundit roundup, and I think I sent you on the list too, which looks at the percentage of expected medical cost covered by various plans. The point being that Medicare Parts A, B, and D cover about, looks like 76%. Employee-sponsored PPO plans cover between 80 and 84%. Employee-sponsored HMO plans usually cover about 93%. Traditional Medicaid for children covers about 100%. What the Republicans are suggesting covers about 56%. My point is that Medicare Parts A and B, with their less than 80% coverage, still leaves 20% of the coverage that you have to do. That's why there's supplementals, Medicare Advantage, all that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
And the idea that all we have to do is single payer Medicare for all and we're done isn't true, because you still have 20% that needs to be covered. How do you get that covered? Are you doing it with private plans? Are you doing it with a Medicare Advantage style thing? That means that private insurance companies haven't gone away. Is that what you want? Is that what you mean? Is that what you intend? So I think it's important to kind of define all of these terms when you're talking about it, because what I hate is good ideas reduced to a slogan to the point where it's unworkable. And what I mean by unworkable is you have to have a complex infrastructure in place underneath, and that work currently is not being done by the single payer advocates. And I think we went over last week what happened in California, for example, with a single payer bill that didn't account for Prop 98 that says that X percentage of dollars has to go for educational funding. And if you add single payer to that, you up the bill to the taxpayer. And so that's an infrastructure thing that really has to be addressed before you go and do the next part, and you got to do it in sequence and so on and so forth.
Well, we do know everything is complicated.
It is complicated, and that's why it's so complicated. Yeah. And so I'm just saying,
contradictory.
Don't inundate me with single-payer Medicare for all because it's the right thing to do. Post, I get that, but how are you going to get there? And if you don't do the but how, you haven't done your job. That's all I'm saying.
And okay, well, that's not to say that you either. Well, certainly not to say that you shouldn't be doing that job.
Exactly right. It's not to say that. So here's how I put it in the pundit roundup today.
Okay.
A public option would be you're allowed to buy into Medicare and Medicaid.
Yes.
Single payer would be everybody's on Medicare or Medicaid and there's no more insurance companies. None of those options are universal coverage. They could be, but undocumented immigrants and non-U.S. citizens typically are excluded from those plans, so it's not universal. So for the political ramifications, I wrote, consider whether the more expensive Medicare, which is federal, or cheaper Medicaid, which is state-federal partner, public option is what you want. Which one? How do you pay for it? And what needs to be done to put it into the infrastructure for it? Does it include permanent non-citizen residents who could pay? Does your proposal have a CBO score? And if you're a senator or a Democratic representative from, let's say, Missouri, or Missouri, do you vote for that or do you vote for an ACA fix? And assume you want to get reelected. Assume entrenched interests are moneyed and they're running ads against you. What are you going to do? You have 30 seconds.
Well, that's a good simulation for people. And I was going to say that I think maybe part of the trigger, to the extent that single-payer advocates are upset about having that list of particulars handed to them, is that usually the response, well, how are you going to pay for it, is supposed to be, it's shorthand from opponents for, we're not going to do it because, or, it's just another way of saying no. Whereas, there is a legitimate question to be raised about that. Well, how are you going to pay for it? Well, if you have an answer, well, then okay.
Yeah,
great.
Just debate the answer, be honest about it.
And
then my point isn't that single payer is impossible.
That.
Note other countries have a universal coverage public-private mix. Here in the U.S., Medicare and Medicaid use private providers. The VA hires its docs and uses its hospitals. But my point is that it's extremely complicated, and the shorthand for that is unworkable. Not because if I say unworkable, therefore you shouldn't do it. It's that do the work first. And like it or not, it's likely going to have to evolve, or at least have more foundational work done. If you push too soon and too fast, you're not going to get elected or reelected. And then I have a poll here from Kaiser, which talks about that very thing. Arguments against single-payer plans sway initial supporters. If you tell them, what if you heard that guaranteed universal coverage would give the government too much control over health care, eliminate or replace the Affordable Care Act, require many Americans to pay more taxes? When you do those things, the initial popular becomes unpopular. The other side of the coin is if you have people who oppose it and you tell them that, but it ensures all Americans have health insurance as a basic right, or you tell them that reduce health insurance administrative costs or reduce the cost of, or reduce the role of all private health insurance companies, if it does those things, you get more support. But the public isn't really clued in on what all of this means. And so you have a lot of education to do, as well as the getting the policy wonks and figuring out how it works kind of work to do. And you can't just assume, I saw a poll that says the American public's in favor of it. Not so simple. Nothing about healthcare is simple.
That much we're learning. Yeah. So, interesting. I wonder if we might translate this into saying, to this point, I think the workload for activists and just interested parties has been Overton window shifting. There needs to be enough public discussion of the term single payer just to get the terminology out there and get people thinking about it. And we might be at the stage, we might describe it as being at the stage where we now have to move to where the real policy wonks who have fueled the single payer advocacy and activist movement to this point with the task of simply moving that Overton window. Now the talking points on how to implement some definition of a single payer scheme into the public domain and educating people so that they can educate their neighbors when they harangue them about single payer. We can begin to answer those questions. Might be a tougher load to carry than simply saying, well, single payer solves it all, but that's the next stage. It has to be translated into legislative language at some point. And we have a smart group here. We can distill that down to stuff we can discuss on weekends and at evening cocktail parties.
Right. As Emma Sando writes, many days it feels like the real argument here is whether low-income people deserve to have worse health than wealthy people. I get that. It's an income distribution thing. Wealthier people can afford health insurance, poorer people can't. And so part of the Republicans opening this up for discussion with this horrible bill ought to at least open up the table for that kind of discussion, and that would be a great discussion to have. But if you really want to see healthcare reform happen, and I'm one of those that really does, then don't just give me slogans. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah, well, we can't just pass those, just as repeal and replace. You can't pass the slogan.
That's a great example. You can't pass a slogan, and that's not a bill.
Yeah, so you got to write it down.
And guess what? They're finding that out, and that's why they're failing.
Okay, and the thing that
let's not make
the thing that gives everybody room to operate is to say this is not a no. This is you need to write the bill, and I might support that bill. I might help with that bill. It's just not one now. And you don't need to tell me that you're for single payer. There might be some other people that need that push, but we really need to shift into policy mode and soon. If we do manage, here we are pushing on a completely different front to flip Congress in 2018. How long is that iron going to be hot? So, this is the thing we've learned from
And remember what I said about the Democrat from, Missouri.
Yes.
You want to make their job harder when we're trying to flip Congress? What are you doing to me?
Yeah. And what about the Democrat from Missouri who manages to win election for the first time after flipping a House seat and arrives in Congress? And one, you don't want to have them starting from scratch. Two, you'd like them to get there educated as to what it is that needs to be done when they get there. That could be a real short window, as I said, for that hot iron. You need to strike. That bill really needs to be worked out and ready to roll in January of 2019. We got to be voting on that thing, or preliminary votes on things, at least in committee, in March.
Right.
Or
so
it's not happening.
I got to run, but before I do, I'm going to lead you with one
third
topic, which is completely different than the other two.
Yes.
Because I like switching gears.
All right.
And messing you up.
Done.
Okay. At the very bottom of the list I sent you, I have this tweet storm from Samantha Sanderson from June, which is really interesting, and that's why I'm sending it.
Down at the bottom, you say? Okay.
Yeah.
Got it.
And it's about how come the Trump base is sticking with Trump.
Okay.
Through all of this. You have the nonsense about, what's going on with Russia. You have this boondoggle, crap sandwich of a healthcare bill. Mm-hmm. Why do they still give him the 35% support that he gets or 38%, whatever, today's poll says? Because it doesn't vary really more than a couple of points. And the bottom line here, if you don't have time and it's too long to read, is that between Fox News and evangelical pulpits, that's the Trump base that doesn't vary.
Okay.
I'm not ever trying to convince them of anything. You just have to outvote those folks.
All right.
Right? But everybody else, is malleable, and so I think it matters to everybody else. And I hate that, it doesn't matter to the Trump voter. It matters to everybody else, and that's important. But what's going on with the Trump vote? Because, look, tired of MSM and GOP pundits acting like Trump is a magic hole and the 36% that sticks with him. Here's the reason. And she gives example after example. Evangelical ministers are selling this crap to evangelicals that Trump and Putin are sent from God. And she gives an example. This is not Trump's agenda. This is heaven's agenda. She's got a preacher who's saying this. Pat Robertson is telling evangelicals Putin thinks Moscow is the third Roman Empire and that he's sent from God. Franklin Graham is selling Putin as a savior to evangelicals. There's a Catholic evangelical praising Putin. There's one with a lot of other stuff. She's giving link after link after link here. And so she says, I think you get the idea. Evangelicals are being told God is directing Trump, and that's false. Of course, he's not, but that's what they're being told, and it makes it much more difficult for them to give him up.
Okay. I mean, that's bad, but
It is bad.
they're always
It's
being
terrible.
told that God's directing somebody, and last time around it didn't work. But I'm sure that all these people were saying that God was behind Mitt Romney too. But
Right. So Armando maybe can come on and finish up, but I just thought I would leave all of that out there because I think it's all a giant stew, a jambalaya that really starts to smell bad after a while.
of course, Stu, that is cool. Okay.
All right, Armando wants to know, he thought Eric was Fredo. They were all Fredo.
That's like George Foreman's
That's what you
kids.
have to remember. They're all named Fredo. There's an old Wizard of Oz story about Dorothy on her trip back to Oz. She stops off in the
Is this
kingdom
canon?
of Ev,
Okay.
and she meets a talking hen named Belina. And actually, the hen, I guess, came with her from Kansas. And once you get to Oz, then the animals can talk.
Oh.
And this hen has a whole bunch of chicks. And it turns out the hen named them all Dorothy. Every one of them. There's like 50 chicks, and they're all named Dorothy. And Dorothy said to the hen, "Why did you do that?" And the hen said, "I get tired of calling them all. This way I call Dorothy, and they all come." So I'm thinking that, they're all Fredo. All of Trump's kids are Fredo, and Trump is Fredo.
Yeah, I
The
mean,
whole
it
family's
almost
Fredo.
happened.
Which one is the dumb one? They're all dumb.
There is that too. I guess it almost happened. The first child is born. What should we call him? Well, what's my name again?
Whatever it is. That one, at least I can
Donald.
remember.
Okay,
At least that one I can remember. He's mine.
Yeah, and I mean that is kind of it's awfully creative of them, wasn't it? Is Ivanka the second child?
I don't know.
Because that would mean so. What should we call our first
In order
son?
to know that, you have
Donald
to care.
Jr.
I don't know.
What should we call our first daughter? Ivana Jr., which is what Ivanka means.
So I'll leave you with that, and
Eric.
maybe Armando can come in and catch up a little bit on the Ivanka side of things. But this is Greg Dworkin speaking with my good friend David Waldman Kagro in the morning, who occasionally I actually let get a word in when I'm on. Take care, and I will be back on Wednesday.
All right, fantastic. Thanks very much. Great start. You mentioned Armando. Is Armando signaling you that he's interested in coming on? I don't see anything.
He said maybe,
Okay.
possibly.
We'll see. It's a big
But
mystery.
that was 10 minutes ago.
Oh, I don't know
Things
who
have changed.
Armando is or what he wants to discuss, but let's bring in, let's get Marcos away from work and bring him in here. It could be something important. I don't know.
You never know. All right. Take
Okay,
care.
very good. Thanks, Greg. Talk to you later. And, all right, let's see. What can we catch up with? That is fascinating. This collection of stories of religious leaders, one after the other, either endorsing or somehow otherwise praising or pretending that God has texted them and wanted to signal his endorsement of Putin and or Trump is really kind of remarkable. It's really striking. You'll see it in the linked. In the afternoon roundup, we'll have this story and all the others that Greg mentioned available as links, thanks to Scott Anderson's fine work in the background. And you should check it out. It really is rather striking. I was reminded over the weekend of the strange stories. We've sometimes discussed them in passing on the air that today's alt-right and white supremacist types are inventing for themselves to try and shoehorn their latest allies into their narrative. I've discussed it in terms of American Nazis having to shoehorn Russians into the I guess what you'd have to call the traditional Nazi vision of superior races. That is, of course, at the time, it would have been highly inconvenient for genuine first wave German Nazis, our actual Nazis, the first time around, Nazis 1.0, how would they have explained if the superior race is the white Northern European race, not just German, and that it includes Russians because we're all descended from Vikings, which is the current theory. That would have been extraordinarily inconvenient because, of course, they go to war with one another. That would have been difficult. But Nazis, they're into propaganda. I guess they could turn on a dime if they want to. And at first there was an uneasy alliance, but I don't think it was ever any serious effort at aligning pre or early World War II Germans ethnically in the cultural side of the war with Russia. They were they were willing to have an uneasy peace with them in dividing Poland, but I think it was always the intention to turn their guns on them and go to war. But now, of course, that's not in the offing, and at the moment, political expediency demands that American Nazis 2.0 find a way to shoehorn Eastern Europeans and Russians into their white supremacy scheme. And somebody found the Viking link. If we go further back, we can find a common ancestor, and we'll stick with that. Now Nazis are Vikings as well. That came up actually over the weekend. I wonder if I could find this thing. Did I make note of this? Probably not. I saw in passing, and I knew at the time I probably should have made some note about it, because it's fascinating and it's not something I'm prepared to discuss historically. But I did see somebody tweeting. I bet I can find it too. Their surprise, and I was surprised initially too. And then it occurred to me that they probably have some explanation for this, and it was offered. Somebody tweeting their surprise at having taken a picture of, I guess it was in Charlottesville, Virginia, that the weekend included a Ku Klux Klan rally. I'm not really sure why that happened, but it did, and it was a poorly attended rally, thankfully. And of course, as usual these days, the rally was drowned out by the volume of counter-protesters. But what I was going to tell you about and lead you down this weird path, here it is. It is the tweet of oh, look at that. It's like a famous type person with a blue check mark, a comedian, Samson. Official Samson, as of course how he tweets, and he's got a photo, I think, of the Charlottesville rally. The important part is it shows a Klansman in what has now become the new mod type Klan uniform. They're abandoning the old sheets. For the most part, you still see them in there, and there were some people there in the stupid looking sheets. Although now everybody who shows up at a Klan rally, because there's only 50 of them, everybody who shows up is a Grand Imperial Super Duper Water Buffalo Lodge wizard, and there's too many chefs. So I guess how it's going on. Too many chiefs anyway in this. Anyway, so but the new Klan folks show up in sort of black paramilitary type uniforms, no hoods, so I guess it's something. Their faces are out. Although now when you show up as the Grand Imperial Super Duper, honest to God, you can't believe it, wizard. I can't believe it's not Imperial wizardry. They no longer have the face covered part of the thing, so I don't know whether that's supposed to mean that they think they're being brave. Anyway, the point is, one of the new paramilitary style Klansmen showed up, and he is a white guy, of course, it's Klan. He has dreadlocks. What? And Samson's observing a Klansman with dreadlocks. Hey, everybody, this is where we are now. What do you make of a white supremacist Klan guy wearing his hair in white man dreadlocks? And, of course, most people are like, oh my God, I don't even know what to say to that. However, there was almost immediately reaction from the white supremacist side of things. And I don't think it was Samson that originally sent this. I just happened to see his tweet first somehow when I did the search. But somebody who caught the picture memed this thing up. And the response to it was, I think the alt-right actually came out with it and said, well, or someone recognized the argument. And the argument was, yeah, dreadlocks, the argument among the alt-right is that sometimes, anyway, Vikings wore their hair in dreadlocks too, and this is a Viking thing. Now, I don't have any idea at all what the historical record is on Vikings and dreadlocks. I do not know. And the people in this thread were insistent that if you looked it up, you would find that that was the case, but who knows? With the articles on the internet, I don't know. People could make up anything. And they're certainly not finding fossilized Viking dreadlocks anywhere. I mean, I don't know. There's mummies, I guess, somewhere, and maybe it's even true. I just found the whole thing fascinating. It doesn't really matter whether there's basis in truth or not. It's fascinating that there is circulating among alt-right circles now a justification for wearing dreadlocks as a white supremacist that bases it on the Viking story again. I mean, I don't know. I don't know what's more amazing, the hair thing itself or the fact that there's currency to this Viking story, that the Vikings can excuse everything. You know what they used to do? Vikings, I don't know. I mean, what we need to go in there and do is plant a story on the right Reddit, subreddit board somewhere that say Vikings used to chop their right feet off, when they became 15 years old, and you should do the same thing too. No anesthesia, and see if that works. I can't imagine why it would, but you never know. If the right person says it, it could work. All right. That wasn't supposed to be a major topic, so we can move on from there. There's plenty to take a look at, plenty I did take note of in Pocket, and another couple of, let's see, there's a few angles on I think we probably covered the Donald Trump story well enough. I'll include a couple of the background articles just so everybody if you somehow missed the articles underlying all of this and all of the good reporting that was done, you'll have a fortified background there on that. But yeah, I guess other than I took care of my part of it, but just talking at the top of the show about how unbelievable it was, the idea that you could get a meeting like that arranged and really not know who you were meeting with. I imagine that he got the name. I would guess Donald Trump Jr. wouldn't surprise me. The name is given and he says, okay, I don't really know who that is and I don't care because my friend has told me that this is an important person who will have dirt on Hillary Clinton and clearly we need that. I guess what hasn't been read into the record for us yet, and I guess we ought to put the names on record, is that, okay, I just found you know what, look at this. Side note, in Pocket, I did put away that Klansman with dreadlocks tweet after all, and I guess the first person from whom I saw it was Black Aziz Ansari, who tweets under the handle of Free Your Mind, Kid. Klansman with dreadlocks, y'all. That is pretty amazing. Okay. Well, that's the first. Oh, and that looks like probably the original too, because it's got some 30,000 retweets. All right. Just for the record. So speaking of the record, we wanted to fill out the record. Who is the friend that recommended that Donald Trump Jr. meet with this Russian lawyer? That was not initially given. Again, amazing to me that Donald Trump even entertained for a second the possibility that the press would let him get away with just saying, an acquaintance of mine. Really? What do you mean? What kind of acquaintance? And then I think it slowly drip, drip, drip starts coming out, or at least that's how I read it. Oh, it's an acquaintance of mine, who I met at the Miss Universe contest, which is just, right there I was like, oh, this is spinning off into bad regions here. This is going to end up, by the end of the night, I was like, somebody's going to have, were you interested in adopting a Miss Universe pageant contestant? Is that what that is? Or did someone promise you, a night with a contestant if you had this meeting? What's really Miss Universe? It turned out not to be quite that bad, at least in the first pass of it. But finally this stuff starts coming out. Let's see. I think it begins with the New York Times reporting on this. And let's at least skim through this. They did the most of the initial legwork. How come there's Chinese characters in this? Interesting. All right. Well, anyway, where is the first mention of who the first of all, we did have on our record the name of the Russian lawyer, Natalia, and I think we decided her name was going to be Veselnitskaya. Pronunciation probably being mangled, and her story is that she's well connected and has a considerable background in lobbying in the Kremlin's interests. As I understand it, the way they put it in the stories, in the initial reporting, is she has many government-connected clients, and that can mean everything from, as it does mean in this case, representing state-owned industries as their lawyer, and it also means representing clients who are private citizens but who are oligarchs and connected folks in Russia. So, I'm sure that if you really wanted to be credulous about this, you could credit Donald Trump Jr. by saying, so she's a lawyer. She has a strange portfolio of clients. So does Jamie Gorelick, and everybody on the Democratic side still respects her. She represents Jared Kushner. So, everybody's got to have a lawyer. You could just dismiss it that way. But then, of course, things get a little weird and a little dark. And all right. So then he changes his story, and the Times picks up the story here. I scrolled down. On Sunday, presented with the Times findings, Trump ends up offering a new account. In a statement, he said he had met with the Russian lawyer at the request of an acquaintance from the 2013 Miss Universe pageant, which his father took to Moscow. Got paid to take to Moscow. But it doesn't say that. After pleasantries were exchanged, he said, this is Trump Jr., the woman, we know who she is now, stated that she had information that individuals connected to Russia were funding the Democratic National Committee and supporting Mrs. Clinton. Her statements were vague, ambiguous, and made no sense, which is ironic because his statement is vague, ambiguous, and makes no sense. No details or supporting information was provided or even offered. It quickly became clear that she had no meaningful information, by which he means no dirt on Clinton, or at least I need you to believe that she didn't eventually pass me any dirt on Clinton. I don't know whether I believe that or not, but that's what he's saying. He said the discussion then turns to the adoption of Russian children and the Magnitsky Act. And it's explained in a lot of the background reporting, and some of the articles we'll be linking to, the Magnitsky Act, named for a Russian activist, anti-corruption activist, who exposed some major acts of corruption in Russia under Putin, and I think probably involving Putin himself, and who, like so many people in Russia who expose Putin's corruption, mysteriously dies in jail. And it's an American law named for him as a tribute to his brave activity in exposing human rights violations and corruption, etc. And Putin found this American law particularly outrageous and personally insulting, and he blamed Obama for it and blamed Hillary Clinton for it as well, as thanks to her time as Secretary of State, and that she was, generally speaking, distrustful of Vladimir Putin, as most people ought to be. That makes him mad. He took personal offense and particular offense at this Magnitsky Act, and he had set his army of diplomats, lawyers, lobbyists, oligarchs, whatever levers he could pull to try and undermine either the integrity of the act or the reputation of the man for whom it was named, anything that they could do to lessen the impact of this, because the law, as it's described here, blacklists suspected Russian human rights abusers, and those are going to be all of Putin's friends and Putin himself. And as the Times writes up, the 2012 law so enraged President Vladimir Putin of Russia that he halted American adoptions of Russian children. That's the only bearing that adoption has on all of this. And once again, I want to emphasize to you in your own discussion about it, your own writing about it, your own tweeting about it, we really ought to be talking about it in terms of sanctions relief for human rights abusers. There's nothing to do with adoption in here. Anyway, Trump gives up on the meeting because he doesn't get the dirt. The Times then goes on to report later on, 2 people briefed on the meeting said the intermediary who set up the meeting, we still have that, was Rob Goldstone, a former British tabloid journalist and the president of a company called We, like French, yes, O-U-I, We Too, get it, We Too? We Too Entertainment, who had worked with the Miss Universe pageant. Now, as I understand it, Goldstone is actually like a semi-famous and connected guy in the business, although I'm not certain what business that is. I mean, entertainment, generally speaking. I never heard of Rob Goldstone, but I'm not clued into the entertainment world either. But every time I see a story like this where they're talking about somebody who's not household name famous, but the industry players say, it's when it's the entertainment industry. The entertainment industry says is a player. I'm always amazed at like how many ways there are to make what I guess amounts to a pretty good living in the entertainment industry. What does this guy do? Who knows anything about We Too Entertainment? They work with the Miss Universe pageant. That seems like a step possibly above county fair circuits, I guess. But I guess there's some money connected to it because it's full of oligarchs and Donald Trumps. And rich guys are willing to drop enormous sums of money when there's, as they might tell you, hot chicks around. They do dumb things and spend too much money, and I guess that's a lucrative business. Anyway, so as it turns out, it's Rob Goldstone that I somehow suggests to the Russian oligarch's son, who also is an intermediary in this, to set up this meeting. It's a very complicated web of connections here. So the Times has, this article that I'm looking at here, has the Rob Goldstone connection, but I don't know if they get down, in this one to the story of the Russian oligarch family that ends up setting up the meeting. There's a little bit of description here before I go on to the other articles and get that stuff of Veselnitskaya's background. It says her clients included state-owned businesses and a senior government official's son, whose company was under investigation in the United States at the time of the meeting. Her activities and associations had previously drawn the attention of the FBI, according to a former senior law enforcement official. Ms. Veselnitskaya said in a statement on Saturday that nothing at all about the presidential campaign was discussed at the Trump Tower meeting. She recalled that after about 10 minutes, either Mr. Kushner or Mr. Manafort left the room. She says that she, quote, never acted on behalf of the Russian government and never discussed any of these matters with any representatives of the Russian government. Whatever. The Trump Tower meeting was disclosed to government officials in recent weeks when Mr. Kushner, who's also a senior White House aide, filed a revised version of a confidential form required to obtain a security clearance, which I guess means he still doesn't have one, but that doesn't matter. In the Trump administration, Trump just winks at you and you consider yourself cleared. Okay. So I think that's all we wanted to mine from this particular thing. Although there is some more information down here. In addition to her campaign against the Magnitsky Act, Ms. Veselnitskaya represented powerful players in Russia. Among her clients is Denis Katsiev, the Russian owner of Prevezon Holdings, an investment company based in Cyprus. What do you know? He is the son of Peter Katsiev, the vice president of the state-owned Russian Railways, and a former deputy governor of the Moscow region. In a civil forfeiture case in New York, the Justice Department alleged that Prevezon had helped launder money linked to the $230 million corruption scheme exposed by Mr. Magnitsky by putting it in, you'll never guess, real estate and bank accounts. Prevezon recently settled the case for $6 million without admitting wrongdoing, and that's important. That comes up a little bit later. Again, what's her name? Veselnitskaya has a client, Katsiev. Katsiev is the Russian owner of Prevezon, the investment company based in Cyprus, the son of Peter Katsiev, vice president of Russian Railways, a former deputy governor of Moscow's region, and the New York Office of the Justice Department alleged that Prevezon, owned by Dennis, had helped launder $230 million worth of corrupt money gotten in a scheme that Magnitsky had exposed. Get it? So, Katsiev is caught by Magnitsky, the person, and is prosecuted, well, and not prosecuted because it's a civil case, but is suspected of laundering corrupt Russian money in real estate and bank accounts. And you'll never guess, once we get down to details from subsequent articles, what sort of real estate he might have laundered his money with, and that he was doing it in a bank in Cyprus. We'll wonder which bank in Cyprus might they have been laundering through. Couldn't be the Bank of Cyprus, certainly. Totally wouldn't be them, because that's where Wilbur Ross is a director. How weird would that be? Ms. Veselnitskaya and her client also hired a team of political and legal operatives in the United States, by the way. The team included Rinat Akhmetshin, an emigre to the United States who once served as a Soviet military officer and who had been called a Russian political gun for hire. Fusion GPS, that name came up a bit over the weekend as well, a consulting firm that produced an intelligence dossier that contained unverified allegations about Mr. Trump, was also hired to do research for Prevezon. The FBI began a counterintelligence investigation last year into Russian contacts with any Trump associates. They were, of course, focusing on Manafort and Carter Page and Roger Stone. Now, of course, that investigation has expanded. You know all about that. You know about Michael Flynn being under investigation as well. Let's move over to, let's see, where's the next good roundup of things? Shall we look at, what the Washington Post followed up on that later yesterday. Did they touch on the actual Russians who said that they helped broker the meeting? Is this the article? I have to skim and see. There's so many of them now at this point that, here's Goldstone. We're up to the point where he doesn't name who the acquaintance is. It turns out that in an interview on Sunday, Goldstone fesses up, apparently. He tells the Washington Post he had arranged the meeting at the request of a Russian client and had attended it along with Veselnitskaya. Now, so that's interesting. So did Goldstone go to the meeting? Is that what it says? I guess so. Goldstone has been active with the Miss Universe pageant and works as a manager for, here we are, Emin Agalarov, a Russian pop star whose father is a wealthy Moscow developer, real estate, wow, who sponsored the pageant in the Russian capital in 2013. So now this thing begins to take some more shape, just in terms of figuring out who are the people who put the meeting together. So it's a Russian oligarch who has a son who's a pop singer. I don't know whether he sang at the Miss Universe concert or not, but the oligarch dad paid the money to sponsor having the Miss Universe pageant in Moscow. Trump at the time owns the pageant, travels to Moscow, ponders out loud on Twitter whether he can become best friends with Putin at the event, by the way. And the money for fronting the money for putting it up there is Agalarov, the father. The son, the pop singer, works with his manager to get connected there. So interesting. Goldstone says he wouldn't name the client when he spoke to the Washington Post, but eventually it all gets put together elsewhere in the press that it does end up being this pop singer. Though Goldstone said Veselnitskaya wanted to discuss ways that Trump could be helpful about the Russian government's adoption issue should he be elected president. Again, here it's being used as a euphemism incorrectly. I don't think Veselnitskaya is actually concerned with the adoption. It's just that they know that's the carrot that they can use to get the sanctions lifted. We can get your adoptions back on track if you'll lift these sanctions. I don't know why they thought that the Trumps would have any particular interest in that issue yet. They're not really paying it. Even after they won the election, they weren't really paying attention to what do my constituents really want me to do. The adoption issue, just even by Trump's admission, is just not on their radar. Although I do wonder sometimes whether there's any weird connection to Trump models and his trafficking in, underage Russian girls. That's speculative, though it would be irresponsible not to speculate. Anyway, it goes on to say here, the Washington Post's reporting on it, once she presented what she had to say, it was like, can you keep an eye on it? Should Trump be in power? Maybe that's a conversation that he may have in the future, Goldstone said. That's how Rob Goldstone characterizes the tenor of the meeting. In the Sunday interview, Goldstone did not describe the conversation about Clinton or indicate that he had told Trump Jr. that he would provide information helpful to the campaign. He did not respond to a second request for comment late Sunday. Likewise, a spokeswoman for Donald Trump Jr. didn't respond either. That was, I guess, the last of their cooperation with the Washington Post. Now, also reporting on the story, BuzzFeed, and then summarizing the reporting, Think Progress. I want to add these two bits to the puzzle before I move on to one more example of the familial corruption. We'll take a look at this BuzzFeed piece. Salvador Hernandez, the reporter for this one, Trump's inner circle met with a Kremlin-linked Russian lawyer during the election. That's a pretty basic headline, but this one I think puts all the pieces together, or does it? This is dated a little earlier than I thought. Did they just suppose that this was the case, that they had met with the client? This was a very weird. Oh, maybe I grabbed this one for the. That's right. I grabbed this one for it was one of the first places to post, BuzzFeed was one of the first places to post the text of Donald Trump Jr.'s very stupid and hardly believable explanation. That's why I grabbed this one. Is there more down at the bottom? It's very, you know what I need is something, there needs to be like a highlighting feature in Pocket here so I can find the relevant parts for all this. No, this isn't it either. We'll set this one aside. I think maybe Think Progress is the one that did the work on the connection, or else and if they were reporting on someone else's groundwork, I'm sure that they linked. Judd Legum at Think Progress had this piece. This was the interesting one. The music video that connects President Trump to his son's meeting with a Kremlin-backed lawyer. At this point, before I read this one, we were kind of stuck at, okay, so Rob Goldstone, who did some work around the Miss Universe pageant in Moscow in 2013, knows Donald Trump Jr. and arranges this meeting. But what about the oligarch and his son? And there really needs to be a Russian oligarch in here at some point. It can't really just be that a music producer who is working on the pageant, I guess it could be, but then there have to be some explanation. Why is this music director, not currently known to be one of Donald Trump's best friends in the world or anything, be able to convince him to take this extraordinary meeting, whether he knows the Veselnitskaya's name or not? It's an extraordinary request. There would have to be an enormous amount of money on the line here, or else somebody who is very, very rich. That's the sort of thing that Donald Trump Jr. would respond to, unless, if it was a good friend of his from school, that would be something, but that's never offered. So here's what Judd has here. The music video that connects President Trump to his son's meeting with a Kremlin-backed lawyer. After months of deriding suggestions that the Trump campaign colluded with Russia in the 2016 presidential election, Donald Trump Jr., who served as a top aide in his father's presidential campaign, made a stunning admission on Sunday. Trump Jr. admitted that he took a meeting with a Kremlin-connected Russian lawyer with the expectation that she would provide him with information damaging to Hillary Clinton. He brought along Paul Manafort and Jared Kushner, you know who they are, then a reprinting of his statement. comes up. Then, in his statement released Sunday, Trump Jr. makes it clear that his biggest disappointment was, he claims, that Russian lawyer Natalia Veselnitskaya didn't deliver the goods. It represents the first public indication that at least some of the in the campaign were willing to accept Russian help, according to the New York Times. President Donald Trump quickly attempted to distance himself from the meeting. A spokesman for Trump's personal lawyer, now his spokesmen have spokespeople, said he was unaware of the meeting and did not attend it. By which we're supposed to mean, think that Donald Trump was unaware of the meeting and did not attend it. Although my initial reading of it is, well, Trump's personal lawyer was unaware of the meeting and didn't attend it, but I'm sure that they were speaking of Trump. Not so fast, though, says Judge. Trump Jr. said the meeting was set up, quote, by an acquaintance I knew from the 2013 Miss Universe pageant. The Washington Post revealed that acquaintance was music publicist Rob Goldstone. Goldstone, in turn, told the Post that he had arranged the meeting at the request of a Russian client. He refused to disclose the name of that client, but Goldstone is the manager for a Russian pop singer named Emin Agalarov. So now we're beginning to get down to, all right, the Washington Post told us that, but here's the new stuff, I think. Agalarov's father, billionaire developer Aras Agalarov, sponsored the 2013 Miss Universe pageant. They've both, which, by the way, would mean what? Sponsored the pageant. At some level, that probably means he paid money to Donald Trump, the owner of the pageant. That's how you sponsor such a thing. It could be that he paid only third-party vendors all the costs involved with staging the production in Moscow, and no dollars went to Donald Trump. But that would be ridiculous because, if there's Donald Trump and dollars in a room, there's no way he doesn't make a grab for them. Which is another story. I'll get to it. I mean to get this other one on the record. Emin included Miss Universe contestants in a music video that also featured Donald Trump. So that's one of the other interesting things that happens there in Miss Universe in Moscow in 2013. Why, you might ask, why would you bring the Miss Universe pageant to Moscow? Why would you bring anything to Moscow? It's a prestigious thing for Moscow. Business opportunity, yes. Particularly, they, of course, love the idea of having Miss Universe there. Beautiful women will come to Moscow, and we will be paying all the bills and have big champagne, whatever. They like to have hot chicks around. Plus, his son, he's got a burgeoning career as a pop star. I don't know how legit he really is. I got no idea, but that would give him an opportunity to show up at red carpet type events and hang out in places where Miss Universe contestants would be. They're rich, they're famous, he's a singer, he's young, he wants to get one of these girls. Okay. I am oligarch. I spend the money this way. That's what they do. And by the way, a great opportunity to film a music video with lots of hot chicks who are around from international places. I'll put her in a music video. Oh, you got to be in the music video, Miss Venezuela. Why? I never heard of this guy. Look, I sponsored the Miss Universe pageant. You're a Miss Universe contestant. Donald, tell her she has to do it. Oh, you have to do it. I'm going too, so it's going to be great. And so that's what ends up happening. Essentially, rich Russian oligarch buys the Miss Universe pageant for a week. They move it to Moscow. His son, the pop singer, gets to go to hot parties and film a music video, and Donald Trump and the contestants from the pageant are in it. The video is embedded in here. I wonder if it's any good. Should we play it? Is that I mean, we'll get into copyright trouble if we pay too much. What sort of stuff is in here? I'm just curious. The video appears to be opening here with our pop star is sitting at a boardroom table of some sort, looking at headshots of people who appear to be pageant contestants. Like, I don't know whether he's supposed to choose one, for a date or what. I'm not certain what the setting is here, but they're all looking at headshots, and now he's pondering something else. He's frustrated. Our pop star is. Here's the music. Let's see. What's this like? He's very pensive. He's very poppy, I can tell you that. I can't tell what the hell he's doing. Here comes the singing. this in English? Yeah, I guess it is. All right, well, it's in English. I still can't understand it, but that's pop music for you. Anyway, what appears to be happening in the rest of the video is he is looking at beautiful women and spilling his coffee on himself in amazement at how beautiful they are. So that's your standard thing. And now he gets to hang out with them all because his dad's money bought the Miss Universe pageant for a week. In March, the Think Progress article continues, Amin told Forbes that, quote, he has maintained contact with the Trump family since the election and has exchanged messages with Donald Trump Jr. as recently as January, and that President Trump himself sent a handwritten note to the Agalarovs in November. I guess, hey, I just won the election. I'm going to be president of the United States. Isn't that awesome? Do you want anything? That's fantastic. Thanks for all your help. Thanks for all your money, et cetera, et cetera. I don't know what the note said. By the way, people were digging through Donald Trump's Twitter archives for mentions of the Agalarovs, and in fact, it's out there. I think some sort of congratulatory post Miss Universe tweeting about how wonderful everything was and how well it went off and how Amin was great, and I think it hinted that he did perform, and lots of congratulations, you know, I'm sure pro forma stuff from Donald Trump, but it's out there. And Agalarov has a Twitter account, so that's something. Anyway, where were we with this? Oh, yes. So Amin also noted, he said that he and his billionaire developer father, Aras, had plans to build a Trump Tower in Russia that would now likely be under construction had Trump not run for office. Interesting brag to make, of course. I have no business interest in Russia. I have no deals in Russia. I have no buildings in Russia. He was trying his best to get them, but it never came together. In fact, it says here, Amin said his family had signed a letter of intent with their counterparts in New York to begin work on the tower, but plans were shelved after Trump announced his candidacy. And then it says, now that he ran and was elected, he does not forget his friends, Amin Agalarov told Forbes. His claim of friendship is buttressed by a video that Trump sent him in 2014 to sell, not the music video. He filmed a different thing in 2014 to celebrate Amin's 35th birthday, during which the very creative Donald Trump says, you are a winner, you're a champ, you're great at real estate, and boy, can you entertain, Trump says. And here is the message. I don't think it's going to say anything more than that, but it's embedded in the Think Progress piece if you want to take a look. Amin also claimed he performed for Trump at one of his golf courses, okay, and spent time in Trump's New York office just prior to the announcement of his presidential campaign. While Trump was in Moscow, Aras Agalarov helped organize a private event at Nobu for Trump to, quote, meet more than a dozen of Russia's top businessmen, including Herman Gref, the chief executive officer of state-controlled Sberbank PJSC, Russia's biggest bank. I think every bank claims to be Russia's biggest bank. Trump appeared on stage with both Agalarovs at a press conference after the Miss Universe competition, along with Miss Connecticut USA, Erin Brady, on the stage with them. I guess she had just won, I don't know, she won the pageant? Yeah. This is interesting. This is in Las Vegas. It says here in the caption, Miss Connecticut USA, Erin Brady, and Donald Trump look on as Russian singer Amin Agalarov speaks on stage with his father, Aras Agalarov, after Brady won the Miss USA title in Las Vegas. Credit to AP photographer here. Jeff Botari, by the way. Thanks, Jeff, for the fabulous picture. It's a very interesting shot in that, Miss USA doing her best here to be playing the part here, but she's standing here in a pose that suggests, despite the smile frozen on her face, that she's asking, what the F is going on here? I just won the Miss USA contest. Why am I not the one at the podium speaking? How is it that the rich guy from Russia's son is the one speaking? Look what's on the stage here. The newly crowned Miss USA, Donald Trump, celebrity in his own right and owner of the pageant, Aras Agalarov, who is, okay, nobody knows who he is, but he's a rich Russian oligarch rich enough, I'm sure, to announce, well, now that you've won here in Las Vegas and you're Miss USA, you're going to go on to the pageant finals, the Miss Universe finals in fabulous Moscow, Russia, thanks to Aras Agalarov. So, okay, Aras, you get on the stage. Now, the son is there. Now, wait a minute. Your claim to fame here is you're the son of the guy rich enough in Russia to pay Donald Trump to move the Miss Universe pageant to Moscow this year, right? Okay. So Trump has a claim at speaking. Aras Agalarov has a claim at speaking. Miss USA here, who's just been crowned Miss USA, has nothing to say. But who's talking? It's the rich guy's son. Well, he's a pop star. Okay, I don't know. It's just, it doesn't say anything really about Donald Trump per se, just sort of more about the weirdo money grubbers and what they do with their cash who surround Donald Trump. No news here, but this is just consistent, par for the course, let's say. Both Agalarovs and Trump appear on the cover of the January 2017 issue of Time to Eat. It's a magazine, the magazine of the Crocus Group. What's the Crocus Group? Why do they have a magazine? I don't know why they have a magazine. The Crocus Group is the Agalarovs' real estate company. The Agalarovs' real estate company has a magazine. And the magazine is called Time to Eat. What? Is it about restaurants in their buildings? I have no idea. Gee whiz, the Agalarovs are on the cover of the Agalarov magazine, and they're with their friend Donald Trump. The Russian oligarchs love ostentatious consumption, and nothing symbolizes ostentatious consumption better than the American champion of ostentatious consumption, Donald Trump. Time to Eat. What the hell is that as the name of the thing? Anyway, so they're there, and the picture is they're in Las Vegas. I guess it must have been just after the pageant, and they have a star, like a Hollywood Walk of Fame type star with his name on it, and his signature is on it, scrolled at a terrible angle. And I don't know. It's just a stupid, schlocky production, and there it is. So he's on the cover of the magazine about their own company. Okay. That's not hard to do. Forbes noted at the time that Amin Agalarov's remarks seemed to contrast with the president's repeated insistence that he holds no ties in Russia. Aras Agalarov also appears in the partially unverified, this is where it becomes important. Who cares if he's on the cover of Time to Eat, right? He appears in the partially unverified Steele dossier on Trump. Remember? The one that told us that there was the P-tape. This, of course, compiled by the former British intelligence officer. Here's an excerpt from page 27, item number 3 on that page that says, the two St. Petersburg figures cited believed an Azeri business figure, Aras Agalarov, with offices in Baku and London, had been closely involved with Trump in Russia and would know most of the details of what the Republican presidential candidate had got up to there. Well, it is very interesting. Now, all of a sudden, of course, we find out that when the Agalarovs call and say you got to have a meeting with a Russian-tied lawyer about removing sanctions against our worst human rights abusers, P.S. something, something, we have dirt on Hillary Clinton, he says, yes, I'll take that meeting. The Agalarovs have a close relationship with Russian President Vladimir Putin, by the way, who had awarded Aras the Order of Honor in 2013, same year that he bought the pageant to Moscow. When Putin was unable to meet with Trump during the Miss Universe pageant, he sent a gift to Trump instead. According to the Daily Mail, Putin enlisted Aras Agalarov's daughter and Amin's sister, Sheila Agalarova, to personally deliver the gift to the Miss Universe offices in New York. Does Miss Universe actually have offices? Or are they just basically the Trump Tower offices? It's Trump's office. It doesn't say what the gift is, but what a weird way of putting it. The Daily Mail does that. Okay, he's going to send a gift, and Putin asks Agalarov, can you send your daughter to deliver the gift? I don't really know what that is even supposed to mean, but it's when they're dealing with Putin and Trump and his weirdo friends and the pageant side of him, including somebody else's daughter is always a weird and creepy idea. I don't know. I find the whole thing interesting. We'll see what else shakes out of this over the next couple of days. Let me get on to one other item that I think is considerably worse. And believe it or not, we haven't spent any time on it. This will likely close out our consideration of Trump world for the day and help wrap up the show for the day. This McClatchy piece. McClatchy always has the best stuff, somehow. I'm not certain how that happens, but they do superior work. Our writer here is Anita Kumar, who points out a very troubling development. I think this one goes actually above and beyond all the problems of the emoluments clause. Really, basically, what Anita is outlining here is straight up regular bribery with a small twist, as opposed to saying, here's a brick of cash and I want you to do X, Y, Z. And the quid pro quo is right there on the spot, of course, but you're talking about payments directly to him as opposed to profits gleaned by him, like, say, from ownership of a hotel where the Bahrainis might book a large-scale event that will benefit, you'll pay the hotel kicks up to the Trump organization, and Donald Trump takes his money, his profits from the Trump organization. At least there's a couple layers of insulation there. This is really amazing, though. Here's our headline. Trump personally pockets club membership fees, breaking with industry norms. And yes, once again, this is not normal. Breaking with industry norms, not just political norms. Check this out. Dateline Palm Beach, Florida. Even as he serves as president, Donald Trump earns a tidy sum, tens to hundreds of thousands of dollars, every time a new member joins one of his Tony clubs. Now, again, this is the sort of thing that you would say, well, of course he makes money whenever people join his clubs. But I think we all imagined that the structure was if you join the Mar-a-Lago club, you would pay money, you pay your initiation fee to the Mar-a-Lago club. And the Mar-a-Lago club is, of course, owned by the Trump organization. And so it kicks its money to them. And the Trump organization, of course, owned by Donald Trump, and they kick the money. The organization kicks money into his pocket personally. But we've already learned how he blurs the line between himself and the Trump organization generally. I mean, I think this is his problem, distinguishing between ownership and control. Ordinarily, a corporate structure would be more difficult for him to simply avail himself of all the funds, whatever funds are available to the Trump organization. He directs their use in ways that inure to his personal benefit, in addition to just saying, give me some amount in cash to carry around in my pocket with which to buy, chewing gum or whatever the hell else I might spend money on. But that's not the way he structures things. Whether it's the Trump National Golf Club in Bedminster, New Jersey, where the U.S. Women's Open Golf Championship starts Monday. I guess that's today. Wow. The club outside the nation's capital, where the president often spends time over the weekend, previously known as the Lowe's Island Club, now Trump National in Virginia. The historic Mar-a-Lago Club, which really, don't even give him the historic label, but okay, where he hosted the president of China and the prime minister of Japan, or one of his other exclusive addresses. Each collects a hefty, she says, initiation fee from new members, up to $450,000 now per person, with annual dues on top of that. And you'll recall, of course, that the Mar-a-Lago initiation dues was famously reported doubled from $100,000 to $200,000 immediately after the election. So now somewhere, some form of membership can cost up to $450,000. Okay, fine, right? Where's the surprising part? Trump has benefited greatly from these initiation fees for years, even back when it was typical for membership fees to take the form of refundable deposits. That's the way it really used to be at golf clubs. Refundable deposits. Trump broke with the norm for such clubs by taking the money for himself, according to documents and interviews. In 2004, Trump had access to nearly $100 million from refundable fees from members at just 4 clubs, including Mar-a-Lago. according to a personal financial statement written by his accountant that year and obtained by McClatchy. Reporting by McClatchy, including nearly 20 interviews and hundreds of pages of documents, some from litigation involving Trump and his business, shows that the president puts in place unusual policies that allowed him to keep the high one-time fees charged to new members and put language in his club rules that allowed him to spend the money on anything he wanted. It's definitely unusual, says Jay Caron, CEO of the National Golf Course Owners Association, who's in a position to know, and who's been in the golf club business for 2 decades. It certainly reflects a clever and shrewd way to raise capital. Interesting because, of course, what's Trump's biggest problem in the world since all of his casino bankruptcies? Raising capital. We've heard the problem stated 100 times, 100 different ways. He can't get traditional banks to lend to him. So he needs Russian money, he needs other sources of money, and this is a very interesting and clever way that he's arranged for doing this. Trump's decision to retain ownership of his business while president, this is another angle, including his nearly 20 clubs across the globe, has been sharply criticized by ethics experts who cite a litany of potential problems. Will the president's proposals on taxes, environmental rules, and labor regulations benefit his bottom line? Are members and their guests gaining unfair access to the president? Is the president violating the Constitution by accepting money from foreign officials? Do local and state leaders feel pressure to make decisions that could favor Trump's businesses? I don't think we have anything to compare this to in presidential history, said John Wunderlich, executive director, hey John, for the Sunlight Foundation, a government watchdog group. He is refusing to acknowledge that the office is bigger than his business. In the more than 5 months since he's been in office, Trump has visited Mar-a-Lago on 25 days and his golf clubs on 36, now 37, sometimes more than once a day. According to a compilation of information released by the White House, believe it or not, the visits have led to a flurry of publicity that could boost the club's popularity and revenue, fueling questions among experts as to whether he is using the presidency to make more money. Yes, all true. Mar-a-Lago's profits climbed nearly 25% in 2016 while Trump was a candidate, although overall income at his golf clubs declined 6%, according to his personal financial disclosure statements. Immediately following his election, of course, Mar-a-Lago doubled its initiation fee to $200,000. Just about all publicity is good, said Lawrence Hirsch, president of Golf Property Analysts and a former president of the Society of Golf Appraisers. Can you believe there is such a thing? As he continues to visit his clubs, he raises their profile and potentially enhances their business. Okay, good background. The White House referred questions, of course, to the Trump Organization, the business now run by his sons, which didn't respond to questions. But in an interview after a Mar-a-Lago member quietly arranged, this is great, ready? In an interview after a Mar-a-Lago member quietly arranged for a pair of former Colombian presidents to meet Trump. And by the way, this is exactly what everybody's worried about with all of his transparency issues and his use of the clubs. Right, and the access the club membership gives you to him. People are arranging visits with foreign dignitaries at the club because they're just club members. White House Chief of Staff Reince Priebus told NBC News that Americans didn't need to know about the clubs, including the identity of its members. I mean, this is a private business, he said. It's a private organization. It's a private club. Yes, it's a private club. That's why he had to divest himself of it and have nothing to do with it while he was the president. Telling me it's a private business means nothing. Well, what about this back door to the president's wallet? It's a door, okay? People don't care about doors. What do you mean they don't care about? That's a non sequitur. I know that's a private business. That's why he shouldn't be involved in it. Who's paying the president so that they can get close to him and introduce him to foreign dignitaries and arrange special meetings? I'm not telling you it's none of your business. Why? Well, of course it's our business. Well, they did it at a private club. That's not an excuse. Now, there's no doubt that Trump's clubs are among his biggest moneymakers in his vast empire. He listed more than $325 million in income from those clubs and resorts, according to his disclosures. Trump National Doral, a golf resort in Miami, was his largest source of revenue, $116 million in income. Before he was sworn into office, Trump eschewed calls to fully separate from his business. Of course, you know all about that. Instead, placing his holdings in a trust irrevocable trust, by the way, from which he has the right under the terms of the trust, not necessarily the rest of the body of the law and the Constitution, to draw money at any time, which is amazing. Now, what's really happening here and really so fascinating about this as a backdoor is, apparently, in addition to all this nonsense, Trump's contracts, when you join one of his clubs, instead of making, as you used to do, a refundable deposit that the club would hold on to with the expectation that the money would be used almost exclusively for making improvements at the club. That's why you pay the initiation fee. That's why you pay a membership fee, to put money in to buy stock, essentially, in the club for its upkeep. At Trump's clubs, however, there's a weird clause that says you don't have any expectation, one, that your money will be used for improvements directly at the club. It might be, but that's all at the discretion of Mr. Trump himself. Now, he loves having fabulous properties, so it may be, in the end, that most or all of your money is used that way, but it's flat out says in black and white that the decision-making is exclusively up to him. In addition to which, it is not a refundable deposit. It's not something that if you join the club and you stay there for 10 years and then you move, you retire to Florida, you can get your deposit back. That's the way it is at most clubs. That's the way it was at a lot of the clubs that he bought, and then he changed the policy. And now it is an initiation fee, not a deposit. You're simply paying the Trump organization or this golf course $100,000 for the privilege of becoming a member and then paying the annual dues. But in addition to all of this, no obligation whatsoever on the part of Donald Trump to use that money for the club. He could use it on another club where you're not a member. He could keep it. It wouldn't matter. He can use it to buy oil paintings to decorate the place, paintings of himself, or he can just put it in his pocket and walk away. That is a pretty amazing thing, and what it, of course, leaves the door open to. And I guess the design of it now, in hindsight anyway, is just this. If you want to pay $200, $250, $450, who knows how much more, $1,000 directly to the president, and have no record kept of it, and have the chief of staff of the White House look away and say it's not even your business. You can't ask that question because it's a private club. In other words, you put $450,000 in an envelope, you hand it to the president keeps it, and if you ask for him to take meetings with people from God knows where, he'll do it because he recognizes that you've just put cash in his pocket. And according to the chief of staff at the White House, nobody's allowed to ask questions about that. You have no right to find out who gave him the money, what he did with it, why they gave it to him, any of that stuff, because it all happened at a private club. Because, of course, he owns the private club, which he's not supposed to be able to do and has never been done before in the history of the United States. But hey, this is not normal. Right? Well, there's actually a lot more interesting stuff and some good financial stuff about the way he structures it and uses all that money and the uses he makes of it and the liberties he takes with it. That's included in this article. You should take a look at it. I find this to be an even more interesting line of inquiry than the Donald Trump Jr. thing, just planting the seeds. I think it'll take a couple of days for the Donald Trump Jr. thing to die down, and then maybe we'll pick up the ball on this one, and you'll have heard about it ahead of time. Isn't that great? What else will you hear about ahead of time? I'll tell you what's coming up next on the after show. I'm giving you the preview, but they're even still ahead of the news curve. A black Indiana family gets a letter from their neighbors demanding that they leave the neighborhood. Wow. Raging wildfires across California forces over 8,000 to evacuate. And, of course, Don Jr. has a bigger problem even than his meetings with Russians. Lying to federal officers about it could send him to jail. What else have they got on the last half? We'll find out more about what's coming up on the after show next, just after these words.
From Daily Kos Radio on networksradio.com. You have been listening to the Kagro in the Morning Show
with David Waldman.
Interesting stuff here. On the last half, they report a British forest pumped full of carbon dioxide to test tree absorption, and a restoration project of Liberty Hall at Kean University in New Jersey uncovers a fully stocked wine cellar with bottles almost as old as the nation itself. That's fun, and I pronounced it right. Kean University. Coming up next.